You're looking live at Launchpad 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where Crew-10 is in the process of suiting up for their mission. Today's T0, updated to the second at 7:48 and 56 seconds p.m. Eastern Time. That is when Dragon, a spacecraft sitting on top of the Falcon 9 rocket, will launch them to the International Space Station. Crew-10 is a continuation of regular crewed flights from the U.S. soil to station as part of NASA's Commercial Crew program. As we look at the historic countdown clock and shift to an orbiting shot from our helicopter team here at the Kennedy Space Center. Hello and good afternoon. I'm NASA's Daryl Nail, and this is the official launch broadcast of Crew-10. With me to help commentate through the next 4.5 hours is Jessica Meir, NASA astronaut who just did it not too long ago on Crew-7. It's so good to have you back.
Thank you, Daryl. It is wonderful to be here, as always, with my close friends and colleagues heading off to space. It's so wonderful and meaningful to play a part of that role in sending them off.
How about this view of the rocket as we orbit around it? Such a great shot there, seeing the perfect weather that is outside.
Absolutely. It feels so nice outside, doesn't it? Coming from Houston and Florida, usually we're fighting the heat and humidity, and everything just seems to be lining up perfectly today.
We're looking good so far. The mission today, we are flying NASA astronaut Commander Anne McClain, NASA astronaut pilot Nichole Ayers, JAXA astronaut mission specialist Takuya Onishi, and Roscosmos cosmonaut mission specialist Kirill Peskov. Today, the crew's ride to space is the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. Its fourth flight to space, and all four carried crews for NASA. It's back in the rotation. It wasn't initially. It was swapped out because a new capsule that SpaceX had built wasn't quite ready yet, so they swapped it out with the capsule that was going to go on Axiom 4.
Yeah, that's right. So we had a few late-breaking changes, but as astronauts, we are always ready for that. Flexibility is really the name of the game. So we take it as it goes, knowing things can always change. But this is the fleet leader, right? So this is the first time we've used a capsule 4 times for a crewed mission. So exciting event today for my colleagues.
It's reliable, and the Commercial Crew program and NASA knows this spacecraft well, as you mentioned.
This is LD on Countdown Net with a T-minus 4-hour situational awareness briefing. We're currently counting down to a T0 of 19:48:57 UTC and 23:48:57 UTC, 19:48:57 local, with a minimum of 2 launch opportunities for Thursday and Friday for backup attempts. The crew are currently getting suited up at ONC. The advanced team is currently on the way to the pad to open the side hatch, prepare for crew arrival. Vehicle gases are up, FTS checkouts are complete, and Dragon prop tanks are pressed. Falcon 9 is not working issues at this time, however, hydraulics is undergoing final release bleeds to the system for readiness for flight. Weather is looking favorable at the launch site. The launch ascent weather with meteorological input was used to tune the forecast model, showing a failure possible risk of 14.6% and grow criteria for flight today. Procedure 52.911 is open in the event of crew contingencies from Ingress through launch. And as a reminder, the launch escape system will be armed prior to propellant load today. Hangar X will go into lockdown in T-minus 45 minutes until after spacecraft separation or the launch escape system is disarmed. All personnel are requested to stay in their state locations until lockdown is complete.
All right, that was an update.
MC, do you have a report on Falcon 9 health?
Falcon is healthy and not tracking any issues.
And MD, do you have a report on Dragon health?
Dragon is healthy and not tracking any issues.
This will conclude the T-minus 4-hour situational awareness briefing unless there are any other questions.
Okay, we were just briefed by the launch director for SpaceX, and it was a good brief as we now find ourselves inside the suit-up room as the 4 members of Crew-10 are getting ready. They've got the main part of the suits
countdown.
on.
Advanced team is open side hatch on schedule.
And they are putting on the remaining parts of their suits, the gloves, the boots. We will be hearing from time to time, as you just heard, communications, what we call loops. This is the command loop that will hear the launch director communicate with his crew, as well as the core. When they talk to the astronauts, we'll hear the back and forth once they get into their spacecraft. Just want to make you aware that whenever they have an update, we will pause our commentary so we can listen in. Over the next 4.5 hours, we will walk you through this detailed pre-launch operation and show you all the action live as it's happening from the suit-up room to liftoff. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the background of our co-host today. In 2019, Jessica Meir went out into space for a historic spacewalk. This was back, you launched on a Soyuz, went up to the International Space Station. You and your fellow astronaut, Christina Cook. We'll have that video for you in a second. In the meantime, we are looking at the commander and the pilot for Crew-10 on the left, Anne McClain on the right, pilot Nichole Ayers. And there's Jessica, working hard on the International Space Station. Jessica Meir was doing this spacewalk conducted entirely by women. She partnered with fellow astronaut Christina Cook to replace a battery charge discharge unit. 2 years later, here she is in the role of astronaut support person. This is a taped replay. There she is snapping photos in jumpsuit number 38. Went all the way out to the launch tower. There she is again, saying goodbye to the Crew-2 at the time, helping them with everything they needed. And then Meir served as the assistant to the chief astronaut for commercial crew, and then helped out with the Artemis 2 astronauts. This was most recently. And there you are, right in the left part of the screen, helping out the Artemis 2 crew as they got ready for a dress rehearsal for the Artemis 2 mission, which is planned in February of next year. You also, at the time, were serving as the chief astronaut for the human landing system.
Yeah, I think, this is one of the most exciting things about being an astronaut to me is that we serve many different roles depending on what time it is. So we really gain this incredibly diverse skill set and exposure to all of these different space vehicles, all of these different technologies, and all of the different branches really that we have at the Johnson Space Center. We have ground support astronauts that serve in all of those capacities to help all the different programs and pieces of hardware, technical programs, all the way through, give that crew perspective and be able to provide some information for that. Here you can see in the suit-up room, there's Takuya Onishi and there's Christina Birch. She is the astronaut support person today for Crew-10. She's one of Nichole Ayers' Vapor's classmates, so they're the newest class of astronauts that flies, and she's helping out with everything for getting the crew ready for launch. That must be comforting for Nichole, who sees a fellow classmate who, becomes quite close with your astronaut classmates. She's also the first to fly from that class, so she's taking some stuff on board, some mementos for some of her classmates, which is a nice touch. But speaking of classmates, you too have a classmate, and it's the woman who is serving as commander for this mission, Anne McClain. Yeah, there she is on the screen right now. Looks like she is conducting the pressure check of her spacesuit right now. That's why they're positioned there comfortably in the same chairs that they'll have on the launch vehicle with all the same interfaces, going through that last check to make sure that their suits are indeed pressure tight. We do that on all the vehicles we fly on to make sure things are in good shape. But as you said, incredibly special for me since Anne is one of my closest people here on Earth, whether outside or inside NASA. So it's so exciting to be here with her today. Over the last 11 and a half years that we've been here now, we've really become like family. So I know all of my classmates are so excited and paying attention, watching along to send back up to space again. I imagine it's going to be quite special when we go outside to watch that rocket lift off. Absolutely. And we know the 8 Balls, that's our class name. We have another classmate up there right now, too. Nick Hague is also one of our classmates. So Anne and Nick will have a wonderful high-five moment as they have their handover of a couple days on the space station. And then Nick Hague and his crew, the fellow crew members of Crew-9, will be coming home. Talk a little bit about the suit-up room. It's one of many rooms on the 3rd floor of the Neil A. Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building that make up crew quarters.
The crew has been living and working in the crew quarters for more than a week now.
There's a lot of history in that building. It's always nice when you come here for a visit to KSC for whatever task you're here for. We usually stay in that facility, and there's a lot of history going, way back to the shuttle days, and all the rooms are, I think, pretty much decorated in the same way. So you're part of that spaceflight history.
It has a dorm room kind of feel, does it not?
It does, absolutely.
Let's talk about the weather and give you an update that was given to the crew just about 20 minutes ago. The temperature here is a lovely 67 degrees. We're expecting it to get into the 70s later today. Winds 12 to 17 miles per hour out of the southeast. The concerns, there are none. This is 95% go. It's a high pressure system that's come into the area and just literally been a big bubble of no trouble, as I hear weathermen call it. It just clears everything out. We've got 20 miles visibility today, so it's going to be really nice for anybody who's here in the area to watch this launch, and further out from the area as well.
Yeah, that is the nice thing about launching here on the Space Coast, is that even if you don't have an invitation to come be with the family and friends of the crew, you can watch it pretty much from anywhere. All the local beaches, bridges. It is a fantastic way for everybody to be able to play a part in what we're doing here. When I launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome on a Soyuz, a little bit more difficult to get access to that. So yeah. This is really, really amazing that we can have so many people really involved in the mission and watching this incredible rocket light off.
Before the crew came in here, they had their meals. Of course, the crew members get to dial up their ultimate meal and have the chefs here at the Kennedy Space Center cook up their favorite dish before they fly.
You know what they had?
What's that?
Do you know what they had this time?
So Anne McClain, I sent the questions earlier, and she hadn't exactly decided, but she did want to give a big shout out to the staff at the Astronaut Quarantine Facility, who she says has been providing them with some amazing meals in the days leading up to launch. She says the food is as close to home cooked as we can get. Takuya said he's going to have a Japanese dish. He hadn't decided exactly which one.
I think that they actually had fajitas. Anne told me last night that it ended up being fajitas. Nice. They were excited about it. And I know that one of the things that Tak has planned for them on station is that he has a whole bunch of Japanese food that he's going to share with the crew.
Core on countdown. Lyos seals removed and installation complete. On schedule.
He mentioned in a news conference that that was important to him, was to share the food from his country with his fellow crewmates.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a bit of a foodie, so food's always important to me. But even people who don't care so much about food really do pay attention to it in space. And I think that's just, kind of because of the monotony. When you have a lot of variety, it can really make a lot of difference to your morale and your overall psychological state. So having a little bit of personal touch is really awesome. We trade food items with the Russian crew members, and then if we have any international partners like Tak, they'll have some Japanese food to share. I flew with Italian astronaut Luca Parmitano. He brought up a special Italian meal for us during my expedition. And also Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri, the very first astronaut from the UAE, he launched with me to the space station. And so they had some very special foods from the UAE as well that we all had to share and have a group meal. So those kinds of things are really, really special.
Well, you were eating good.
We were.
As you folks can tell, Jessica Meir has a tremendous wealth of information and experience in space. And so if you want to ask her a question about today's mission or her experience on her time on the International Space Station, just send us the question to #AskNASA. You can see it there on Facebook, X, YouTube, and Twitch. Use that hashtag to get your question in. We'd love to have your question because Jessica is so good at answering them, and it'll help move us along as we go through the rest of the day and counting down this liftoff of Crew-10 at 7:48 p.m. Eastern Time. There's Kirill Peskov. I saw Anne McClain. There she is, the commander on the right, going around, giving each one of her crew members a fist bump.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that kind of crew morale and camaraderie is really gets stronger and stronger and stronger as we go. And when you're leading up to this ultimate moment before a launch, I know that their crew has had such an incredible time training together. Every time I see photos of them, they're laughing. I think they all have a great sense of humor, and they're having a lot of fun the whole way through. There's our boss, Joe Akaba, current chief of the astronaut office.
Let's talk about each one of these crew members. NASA astronaut Anne McClain. She is your Crew-10 commander, as we mentioned. Born and raised in Spokane, Washington, NASA selected Anne as an astronaut candidate in 2013. Crew-10 will be her second space flight after launching aboard the Soyuz MS-11 in 2018 and serving as flight engineer on the International Space Station for Expedition 58 and 59. In total, she spent 204 days in space and completed 2 spacewalks, totaling 13 hours and 8 minutes, and is a West Point graduate and a colonel in the U.S. Army, a highly decorated Master Army aviator, and has more than 2,000 flight hours in 20 different aircraft. She's also an avid rugby player and former member of the USA Rugby women's national team. And of course, she currently lives in Houston, Texas, with all the astronauts.
It's really a great thing to see Anne in this leadership role. I think everyone in our office, and particularly our classmates, know that Anne is just one of those natural-born leaders. So this is exactly where she should be today, and I know that her crew is in such incredible hands. One fun story from Anne. Apparently in high school, she once, with a friend, ordered a pizza that was so big she couldn't fit it in the car. So, because she is the leader and problem solver that she is, she sat in the driver's seat with one hand on the steering wheel and the other hand holding the pizza on top of the car, her left hand out of the window, and then her friend sat in the right with her right hand outside. So they held the pizza and transported it that way. So as you can see, Anne is very well trained, has a lot of experience in transporting things in complex manners.
Look at that. As she puts the mission sticker onto the footrest of the suit-up room there.
Oh, she's got to get it exactly straight.
Yeah. Detail-oriented. That's exactly what you want from your commander.
Absolutely.
I once moved a mattress that way, Jessica, but I wouldn't recommend it. I was in college. Didn't do some smart things. Atta girl, Ann. Way to go. All right, let's talk about our pilot now. The pilot for Crew-10 is NASA astronaut Nichole Ayers. Crew-10 mission will be the first spaceflight for Nichole, a major in the U.S. Air Force and the first member of NASA's 2021 astronaut class named to a crew. A graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, Nichole served as an instructor pilot and mission commander in the T-38 and the F-22 Raptor, leading multinational and multi-service missions worldwide. She has more than 1,400 total flight hours, including more than 200 in combat. Nichole has a twin and was born in San Diego, California.
We mentioned earlier about classmates, and we saw Nichole Ayers and her classmate Christina Birch and my classmate Anne. And another thing that Anne and I have in common is that we actually were on the selection board for Nichole and Christina's class.
How about that?
So that makes us, I think, as individuals, really even more invested in them, in their success, and really just feel responsible. And, especially now that Anne is flying with Nichole, as she said so eloquently, we live with our choices. So, we know that we definitely got it right with this class, but just that level of personal investment is so incredibly satisfying for us to be, working with these astronauts now that, we kind of trying to mentor them and help shape them into these fine young astronauts on their first mission. So it's really, I would say, one of the most gratifying parts now after being here for 11 and a half years is having that mentorship role. And I know that's so important to Anne, and it's made for a wonderful relationship with her and Nichole.
Wow. Truly invested in this mission, both of you, on multiple different levels. Let's talk now about Takuya Onishi. This will be the second mission for Takuya, going to the space station. He's a JAXA astronaut. He launched aboard the Soyuz MS-01 mission in 2016 and spent 113 days in space as a flight engineer for expeditions 48 and 49. Onishi received a Bachelor of Engineering degree in Aeronautical and Space Engineering from the University of Tokyo and soon embarked on a career in aviation with All Nippon Airways in Tokyo. He was selected as an astronaut candidate by JAXA in 2009, and during his stay on the space station, he became the first Japanese astronaut to capture the Cygnus spacecraft in space. When he's not training, Onishi enjoys flying, playing the saxophone, movies, and hiking.
Well, another fun fact for you, Daryl. Did you know that Tak actually has an asteroid named after him as well?
I did not know that. Are you serious?
Absolutely, yeah. So another thing to add
How did
to
that
his
come
incredibly,
about?
I'm actually not sure of the whole story, so we'll have to dig into that one a little bit more. And also, I think there are a lot of things that show what a dedicated person he is. Before he started his flight training, I think there were some nuances with the schedule, and so he was hired for his role, and he was about to start flight training. So instead, he was actually working as a check-in attendant at the airport while he was waiting for that. So he has seen all different phases and levels of the aviation industry, and that's another thing that's so important to this crew. As you've noticed, there's a trend so far, right? They actually have all four of them are professional aviators, whether military aviators or in the commercial sector. So really cool part, which I think allows them, and I know the crew has told me, allows them to really have this synchronization of communication. They really do all speak the same language, and I think that's helped them a lot without their training, and I'm sure it will continue throughout the mission.
The first time
Core
we've had...
countdown, suit donning, and checkouts complete, on schedule.
Good to hear that we're on time. First time that we've had 4 pilots on a crewed mission, all 4 of them able to fly, which is impressive. Lastly, this is mission specialist and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov. His first flight, the Crew-10 mission, will also take him to the International Space Station for the first time. Before his selection as a cosmonaut in 2018, he was a co-pilot on the Boeing 757 and 767 aircraft for airlines Nordwind and ICAR. Assigned as a test cosmonaut in 2020, he has additional experience in skydiving, zero-gravity training, scuba diving, and wilderness survival.
I haven't had the opportunity to work with Kirill since he's one of the newer cosmonauts, but I've heard such wonderful things. Everybody really comments on his sense of humor and adventure. Apparently, he is always setting off in his SUV and driving all around various parts of Russia, and continued that tradition here in the U.S. when he was here for training as well. And he actually his father was a pilot, and his mother was a meteorologist on the airfield. So it seems like his fate really was lying there in aviation. But a funny story, apparently when he was young, he was asked if he wanted to be a pilot like his father. And he said, "No, it's too dangerous. I want to be a train conductor because a train goes onto the tracks and is safe."
Boy, something changed
Yeah.
in a big way.
Absolutely. Clearly, he has become an incredible explorer and adventurer, and I would say he's no longer afraid of flying.
No doubt. Well, he's getting the flight of a lifetime today. Everyone you see in the room wearing the black ninja suits, they are SpaceX employees, with the exception of this fine astronaut right here. That is Chris Birch. Her call sign is Vapor. And
Stretch.
Stretch.
Yeah,
Vapor is Nichole Ayers. You're right. But she's in the role of astronaut support person today.
Yeah, that's right. So she has been in quarantine with them, helping, complete any of the tasks that she can along the way, and really being that main contact point with our office to assist them with whatever they need during this week. It's a really great opportunity, learning opportunity for her as well, since she hasn't been to space just yet, to see it all from this side. And I think, that will make her even more successful on her eventual mission.
There we see the crew getting some photo opportunities inside the suit-up room. I'm sure it's warm in those suits without the circulating air.
Yeah, they're probably getting a bit warm about now.
How long do these crews train before a mission like this when we get to this day?
We're typically assigned ideally about 1.5 to 2 years before the mission. So that is, the way they've worked out the training flow to accomplish all the different things we need to do, ranging from the SpaceX training, which you can see right here, which occurs primarily in Hawthorne in Los Angeles, and also all of the space station training, which happens really all over the world, back home in Houston and then also in all of our partner countries.
And now they are gathering around the table, as you can see there, for a tradition that goes way back, the playing of the card game.
Yeah, this dates back at least as early as shuttle times, and the idea here is that the crew plays a card game with the chief astronaut, and you can see here Joe Akaba, and maybe there's still a little bit of intrigue and mystery involved in the game, because depending on who you ask, you get a slightly different answer. I think the more popular answer is that they play this game, I think it's just going to be a simple high card game here, and they usually play until the commander loses. So that means, they get all of their bad luck out of the way and then they are ready to go for their mission. There's another version that they play until the commander wins, but I think it's the commander loses. Maybe we'll keep a little bit of that intrigue to ourselves.
It looks like they are playing a high card, and she just held back a face card.
It's always nice to have a kind of tradition and also a lighthearted moment for the crew to be there with our boss and just to, enjoy one of these traditions along the way. I think it's one of the things that keeps it special.
Did you play a game when you went up?
We did not have this tradition of the card game while in Baikonur, but we have a lot of other traditions that date as far back to Yuri Gagarin. As far as games, there are usually it's before the launch day, but we play ping pong and we play chess. A big game for the Russians, and a few other games like that. Lots of traditions there.
As we look back out at Launchpad 39A and SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket, with the Dragon spacecraft on top. This is where the astronauts will be heading once they leave astronaut crew quarters. Give you an update. You heard this mentioned on the LD brief. The crew was also updated during their weather brief that SpaceX is looking at a hydraulic issue out at the pad with some ground equipment related to the clamp arm. So they got a crew out there that's working that. They made the crew aware. And so we'll wait an update on the progress of that work. Otherwise, everything else is good. The spacecraft is good. The launch vehicle is good. An interesting note now about Crew-10. After the long-duration mission is complete, fast-forwarding to the end of their mission, Crew-10 will be the first NASA commercial crew mission to target a return splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. NASA and SpaceX have been working together towards the certification and readiness for Dragon recoveries on the west coast of the United States. Since 2019, Dragon recoveries have been like this, primarily occurring off the Florida coast. SpaceX is moving Dragon recovery operations to off the coast of California to allow Dragon to complete its deorbit before safely jettisoning the trunk over the Pacific Ocean now, which is comparable to the first 21 Dragon missions. Crew splashdown locations are on your screen now. You see the map. They will be near Los Angeles, Oceanside, and San Diego, California. The crew recovery vessel, Shannon, will be stationed in Long Beach, California to support the new operations. This will establish this capability that improves public safety. NASA and SpaceX worked for months establishing a number of things. So they had to get new sites, obtain regulatory approvals. They performed engine assessments, software changes, tabletop exercises, and flight rule updates. So a lot went into this to move this operation out to California. Crew-9 is still targeted to come home the way that we traditionally do, near Florida, off the coast. But this is a change for Crew-10.
Yeah, and that vessel named Shannon, that's after NASA astronaut Shannon Walker. These ships have actually been named after astronauts that have flown on the Dragon vehicles. So another nice touch that we like and that's steeped with tradition.
And since we are talking about pre-launch traditions, let's talk about another one. The signing of the patch.
Yeah, so here they are. You can see Anne McClain signing just underneath her patch, and there's Vapor doing the same thing. This is signing the mission patch across from the suit room that we were talking about earlier. So one of the traditions that we've started as we're gearing up for our flight. I think they'll also likely, or they actually did already place a sticker at the exit, and may or may not do another one. I think as they're heading out, I think that one is not necessarily done anymore. I like the other tradition of the license plates. We'll probably get a view of that one. Maybe we can save that commentary for when they see them come out.
Yes, indeed. Now, were you able to go out there and see the signing of the patch?
No, I'm not sure exactly when that signing occurred.
This was a different one. Okay. You mentioned the license plate. That we will see once they walk out of these doors. We'll see all four of them, of course, do a photo op, and then they'll get into the vehicles.
Yeah, and here in this shot, you can see, if you look on the very bottom left, that's the Crew-10 patch that we can see there just in the bottom. And that was placed there just last night. May or may not have actually seen that happen.
I was about to say that is one sharp eye that you have, but you were there, so you know where it was placed. Well, that's nice, right there on the bottom left of the screen and the row of patches that go down, right?
Yeah, it's humbling, you know, standing there when you're getting ready to do that and just thinking about all the history and all the flights before, all the different shuttle astronauts that had also stuck their patch stickers there, and, you know, just thinking about all of the shoulders of giants, really, that have walked through these doors before you.
And as we take a wider view of the outside of astronaut crew quarters, where Crew-10, we had just previously shown you, they were on the inside getting ready with their flight suits. This is the outside now, where media have gathered, as well as family and friends of the astronauts.
Yeah, and you can see the cars lined up there ready to accept the astronauts. And that's another cool tradition. They actually change the license plates for each of the different crew launches. And this one today, they all have the same license plate, and it actually says Lift 10 off. So it's LIF, the number 1, number 0, and then OFF. So it's like a lift off with a 10 in the middle for Crew-10. Clever one. I like that. There it is.
There it is. As you speak. That's well done. Who came up with that? Do you know?
I'm not sure whose idea it was. I remember for Crew-2, there were 3 different ones. There was reduce, reuse, and recycle.
Okay. Certainly a nod to the recyclability of the SpaceX booster and spacecraft. And now we take you back inside astronaut crew quarters and the hallway that connects the suit-up room with the elevator that will take them down from the 3rd floor and onto the ground floor. I get a fist pump from the chief of the astronaut office, Joe Acaba, there off in the distance. It'll take them down to the ground floor, and then they'll come out those doors and into the vehicles that you see there.
When I was the astronaut support person, they asked for Crew-2. That was a super exciting moment for me, too, because you actually get to ride in the vehicles with the crew. And that ride out to the pad, this one was at night, so I feel like it was even a little bit more dramatic. You know, the lights are off, and it's all dark outside, and you just have a few things lit up. And the crew, I'm sure, I don't know what the selections were, but the crew selects their playlist, so they have some, you know, motivating pump-up type music that they'll play as they make that final ride out to the launch pad.
They get that playlist put together. I asked Anne about that, and she said that each person picks 3 songs, and She's guessing that the playlist will be quite diverse. They have, the international crew. She said she's going to contribute some Christian music of some sort. Maybe some King and Country. Mix it up with some Pink, Brandi Carlile, or Callum Scott.
Sounds like Anne.
is that
pretty classic? Classic Anne McClain right there.
Yeah.
So outside, some of their closest family members are gathered, and a few of our, important personnel, management side for NASA and SpaceX. So it's another cool last moment to have that final interaction and, real exchange some words, see your loved ones before you head off to the launch pad. Very special moment. A lot of emotions running strong for sure.
I'm certain. It used to be that they could make a final phone call from the launch tower. I'm not sure if they're still doing that.
Yeah, we're not doing those phone calls anymore. That was what, in that previous ASP footage, that was one of the things that I was doing as a support person is there's that old school phone there up in the tower, and you dial the numbers for the crew members, and they make that kind of final call. But it wasn't really something that was as pertinent as it was back in the day, now that, you're kind of in comms with your cell phone up until the very last minute. So, yeah, something that we're not doing any longer.
And there's a grand view from up high here at the Kennedy Space Center in the Operations and Checkout building, where we will document the journey from the ONC to Launchpad 39A. It's about a 20-minute drive, give or take, depending on how fast they go. But the good news is they get a security escort, so there's no need to stop at any stoplights.
Right, you got to make it a little bit more dramatic, with the sirens blaring and the different colors. It adds to the whole atmosphere.
I asked Nichole what she would be playing, and she says, I'm terrible at picking favorites, so she hasn't decided. So she'll probably be listening to whatever Anne McClain is listening to. Takuya and Kirill, they're going to share a ride, and they chose 2 songs together. Takuya said since he likes to watch musicals, he's going to pick Defying Gravity as one of his favorites. It'll also be a traditional Russian song, one that every Soyuz crew listens to before their launch. I imagine you may have heard it.
Oh, yes. I know exactly the song. I will be excited to hear that one. That brings back a lot of nostalgic memories for really everybody that's flown on the Soyuz. So that's great. I'm glad that they're including that. It's great to have those shared international traditions.
If you're just joining us, we are T-minus 3 hours and 24 minutes until liftoff of Crew-10 from Launchpad 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. There is your crew.
Forward countdown stepping into crew walkout and ONC departure on schedule.
Big waves, humble hands, and a round of applause from all the support staff there. I always think it's neat that they walk into an elevator with a giant poster of themselves on the back.
How long do we wave before the doors close? There they go.
Well, it's about 5 minutes. Yeah. Which I imagine they get down to the first floor quicker than that, but you know how it is. You got to have timelines, and you got to hit those times right on. So
that's right.
So we await as one astronaut and one cosmonaut will soon walk out of the Neil A. Armstrong Operations and Checkout building. So you see us now focusing on the doors. Two astronauts, one cosmonaut, and a JAXA astronaut. One thing I thought was interesting, talking about Takuya Onishi, I thought it was really interesting, he said this in the press conference, that after his first space flight, he trained to become a flight controller because he wanted to see the entire operation from the other side. So for years, he did ground operations, talking to the crews up at the International Space Station, giving them direction. And now here he is. He's going to go up there and be the person that runs the whole ISS.
Yeah, he'll be the station commander, and I'm glad that you brought up that role that he had as the flight director. That's not something that we traditionally do as astronauts, but it was something that he really wanted to do. And it's really interesting, you know, it will make him such a better astronaut in space because he has that ground perspective, which if you haven't worked in the control room is sometimes difficult to understand, you know, why the ground is deciding certain things, why they're asking you for certain things, and having that perspective really helps us work more closely and work more efficiently together as a team. He was actually working as a flight director up until his very last training trip to Japan. So pretty recently he was still doing that even while he was in training. So really, really cool story there.
Imagine his confidence is soaring.
And I think just in that last shot, we saw Haley Esparza and Katie O'Neill come out. They are really our prime points of contact for all astronaut operations with SpaceX.
And here they come. Crew-10 taking their first steps outside as they prepare for their journey to the International Space Station. Commander Anne McClain doing some dabbing. Pilot Nichole Ayers, JAXA astronaut and mission specialist Takuya Onishi, and Roscosmos cosmonaut and mission specialist Kirill Peskov. Did you like that dab?
Absolutely. I'm not sure of the story on that one.
See the astronauts throwing up some heart signs. And there we are looking from close to the doors out to the rest of the caravan. Kirill Peskov. Looks like he's having some lighthearted conversation. Anne McClain with a pink hat that I know says Crew-10 on it, only because you have one as well.
Yeah, the crew have made a lot of gear for their loved ones and their guests, and also, you know, just to be for everyone to be sporting before and during the mission. And those are some pretty cool Crew-10 hats that Anne and her crew designed. It says Crew-10 on the front, and on the side there is the Crew-10 patch. There's JAXA astronaut, Japanese astronaut Aki Hoshide, so he's here as a support person for talk today. Very experienced astronaut, of course,
indeed.
as well.
I see Kjell Lindgren off in, behind the Tesla there as well.
Kjell is there standing with Joe, and he is currently serving a role in as the director of the Flight Operations Directorate. So kind of the boss. He's really the boss above the astronaut office right now.
Okay. I see some Crew-10 shirts out there as well being worn. We'll talk more about how they design their mission patch coming up in a bit. But we want to focus on the live action at this moment. Gull wing doors are up. But in a few moments, they'll come down along with the windows. And that'll give an opportunity for the crew to say a few words before they drive off. That Go Crew-10 t-shirt that you saw in that shot just previously, the woman with the pink hat, looks similar to, I think, an unofficial team shirt that this crew made, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, they also have an unofficial logo, which you can see here sported by my husband, actually. This is a great one, and it's kind of just really shows you the sense of humor of the crew. Anne is certainly not a short woman. She's taller than me. I think she's 5'7" at least, if not 5'8". But her crew is exceptionally tall, if you notice in the suit room and when they were all standing together. So this is kind of their unofficial logo, where they have these 3 giraffes, and then they have Anne, the short little panda.
With her call sign, Anne Nichole, below.
Yeah. That's right. That call sign is something that she had from her rugby days when she played with the Atlanta Harlequins. So we still call her Animal quite frequently in the astronaut office as well, and it's a call sign that really suits her personality.
You don't earn a nickname like that unless you can really lay down a hit, I'm guessing, in rugby. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
We have the commander, Anne McClain, and the pilot, Nichole Ayers, in the second Tesla. And then in the third Tesla are the 2 mission specialists, Kirill Peskov and Takuya Onishi. You see there NASA security will be leading the way. And what a beautiful day for all involved to be outside watching the crew drive away. I mean, the weather is spectacular. It's perfect.
And that last shot there, we saw Anne's mother by the side of the car and, getting her last goodbye there. And that was Kelly Curtis, who's escorting for our office. Kelly has had an incredibly personal and close role with so many astronauts and their families. So it's such an important role that she plays for us.
And there are the windows down as Anne says some words out to the folks who have gathered there. They're clearing the way and will be departing momentarily. And there's the wave goodbye, and they are off. On their way to Space Launchpad 39A. The crew driving away from the Neil A. Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building. This will start the 20-minute drive with a full security escort across NASA's Kennedy Space Center, including right by the Vehicle Assembly Building, which we'll see in a few minutes. As we watch the crew make their way to their launch pad and waiting rocket and spacecraft, let's hear from the crew. And we begin with Commander Anne McClain.
When I get asked why we explore, oftentimes I think, what would our society look like if we didn't explore? What would our society look like if we didn't ask what was over the next hill, what was across that ocean, and for us now, what's beyond our planet? My name is Colonel Anne McClain, and I'm the commander of NASA's SpaceX Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station. I was 3 years old when I first told my family that I wanted to become an astronaut, and I'm fortunate that no one of my family told me that it was impossible to do. They all said, that's going to be a lot of work, and they were right. But they were ready to support me every step of the way. They reminded me of my dreams if I started to get discouraged, because it is a long and challenging road. One thing I knew about becoming an astronaut is that not a lot of people get to do it. It was important to me to choose a career that I was going to love and be fulfilled in, regardless of my selection to becoming an astronaut. So I chose to serve my country as a helicopter pilot and an officer in the United States Army. I still am an active duty officer in the Army. It's something that brings me a lot of meaning to be able to serve the American people in that manner. And it's something that I would be doing still every day if I was not fortunate enough to wear this blue suit. This is my second flight to the International Space Station. I think on your first flight, there's a lot of unknowns, right? You don't know how it's going to feel to go to space. You're very focused on making sure that you know your stuff. On this flight, as the commander, I'm really focused on building a cohesive crew. So over the last year and a half, I've had the pleasure of working with my crewmates on Crew-10, Tak, Nichole, and Kirill. We've shared a lot of meals together, we've traveled together, we've done some tough sims together, and they are three very special people to me. And now we get to go launch to space and do this incredible mission with our good friends. The International Space Station is a proving ground for a lot of technologies for deep space exploration, but it is also a national orbiting laboratory where the U.S. can work with universities, research labs, other countries to develop things that benefit us on Earth, everywhere from cancer research, Parkinson's research, materials research, and at the same time, we're looking at the things that we're going to use on Mars and future moon missions. In my career at NASA, and especially on my first space flight, there were certain moments that I had, like when I came out of the hatch on my first spacewalk, where I realized we are operating at the edge of what humans are capable of. And that is such a special moment. I think it's that intersection of the magical and the technical, where I can look across the amazing beauty of the Earth, but I can see also this amazing creation, the International Space Station. And it doesn't belong to me or to NASA anymore, that it belongs to every single human on Earth. It's our platform to figure out how we got here, or where we're going in the future, and the context in which we live. Our goal is to be a beacon of hope for all of humankind, so that people can look and say, this is what we can accomplish when we work together.
The next member of Crew-10 we'd like to hear from is pilot Nichole Ayers.
Space exploration is so important for humanity. You know, we learn so much as we get further away from Earth. Every time that we make a further step, we learn something and we learn how to adapt, and that is so important to humanity. We are explorers, each and every single one of us. My name is Major Nichole Vapor Ayers, and I am the pilot on NASA's SpaceX Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station. As a little kid, I always wanted to be an astronaut from the time that I was about knee-high. Growing up in Colorado really inspired me to go explore. I loved exploring in the mountains and learning how to camp and hike and live in a weird and exciting environment. Growing up as a twin is probably my favorite part of growing up. You have this built-in best friend to get in trouble with, to go exploring with. We grew up right there in Colorado Springs. We got to see the Thunderbirds fly over the Air Force Academy every year, which really inspired me to become a pilot in the Air Force. I always had an affinity for the sky and for space. Being next to the Air Force Academy kind of was the natural path for me. So I was a very serious little kid who set my goals really high and worked really hard and never got bumped off that path. I got my wings in August of 2014, and then I flew F-22s in Alaska, got to do some great flying up there in the mountains. I had a no-notice 6.5-month deployment. From there is when I moved down to Houston to start my job as a NASA astronaut. Crew-10 is a group of pilots who are going to space together to execute science and maintenance. We are about to launch to the International Space Station for a 6-month rotation aboard the orbiting laboratory. We've got a great group of humans who are funny and caring and kind and also wicked smart and capable and efficient. Our major goal is to get to the space station, execute the mission as well as we possibly can, and then come home still funny, kind, and caring about each other. Doing science in space is so important because here on Earth, there's gravity and it's a force that holds things down, and in space we can remove that force. And so we get a glimpse into processes and forces and structures that are too small or too weak and they can't actually flourish here on Earth. Long duration spaceflight is so important for human research to figure out how humans adapt and what happens to your body in microgravity. We get to learn how hardware and plants react in space, and we get to put them in this environment that's pretty harsh. You know, we're outside of the atmosphere, and now we don't have the protection of the atmosphere. What happens to those things, and how do we fix them, and how do we better prepare our people, our hardware, our food, our water systems for that deep space exploration? Throughout all of our training, it's been apparent to me that there is a massive humanity that gets us to space. It takes a village to get us there. The International Space Station wouldn't be where it is today without the international cooperation, and it's just blown me away with how many people it takes to get to space. From Crew-10, we just want to say thank you.
And we are enjoying learning about this crew that is passing the Vehicle Assembly Building, an iconic building here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. There they go, right by it. This is where NASA is stacking its Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft inside there, as you well know, Jessica. And doing that for Artemis 2, which will send 4 astronauts around the moon. It will be the first crewed mission of NASA's Artemis campaign to establish a long-term presence on the lunar surface for science and the future exploration of Mars.
Not much more iconic in the way of buildings around here than the VAB.
It really is true. And very recently reached a major milestone in that, as you see the VAB in the left-hand part of the screen go out of screen, you see they're building Mobile Launch Tower number 2 in the upper left. This is inside the VAB where we're taking care of the twin boosters. Just finished stacking them, both 177 feet tall. They will provide most of the 8.8 million pounds of thrust needed to launch 4 astronauts on a 10-day lunar journey. Since November, crews have used a massive crane to lift and assemble assembled 10 booster segments, each packed with avionics and motors that will safely detach after launch. Now, with the boosters complete, the focus shifts to integrating the SLS core stage, which you just saw, and we'll do that in the coming weeks. And while we're on the topic, Artemis 2 will carry NASA astronauts Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, and Christina Cook, along with Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, on a mission around the moon. Here's Jeremy now with an update about a recent training mission for him and his fellow Artemis 2 crewmates.
Hey everyone, I'm Canadian Space Agency astronaut Colonel Jeremy Hansen, mission specialist for the Artemis 2 mission. I'm here at the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas, where we normally do most of our training. But every once in a while, we like to change it up a bit. Reed, Victor, Christine, and I recently spent several days in Iceland trading in our spacesuits for hiking gear to study its geology and surroundings. Why Iceland? Well, as you can see, it has a similar landscape and terrain to the moon with various volcanic rocks like basalts and breccias and has limited to no vegetation. The Nordic island has been a lunar training site for NASA astronauts since the days of the Apollo missions. My crewmates and I teamed up with scientists and geology experts to explore the huge boulders, formations, and volcanic craters across the lava fields. During our journey, we stopped at various spots to discuss what we observed.
Some of the really fine material is compacting into what's like the glue holding this together.
And even tested different types of tools to collect rock samples. Although we won't be landing on the moon during our mission, this field work and navigation practice will allow us to make informed observations when passing the lunar surface and pave the way for future Artemis crew training. And that's your Artemis Moon Minute.
For more Artemis updates, scan the QR code on your screen or visit nasa.gov/Artemis-Roman numeral 2 or 2 capital I's. There you are looking out one of the windows of a vehicle in the caravan with the helicopter there following them. What a great shot as they take the NASA causeway out to Launchpad 39A. We're doing a little work, a little construction there on the side of the road, but not to worry. I have to stop when I get to that part of the pad and wait for the oncoming traffic, and then we get to go. But when you got a security escort, you just cruise right on through. And many thanks to our flight team up in the helicopter today, getting some beautiful images overhead on what is a stellar day here in Florida. As you can see there, flying right alongside the caravan as Crew-10 makes their way to the gate that enters Launch Complex 39A. The security, as you can see, pulls off to the side, and the crew continues on. I always love this shot where they drive past the hangar and go up the gradual grade to see their rocket in the front of the windshield. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's always pretty dramatic when you're coming up to the launch pad for anything that's up there or any event that's going on, you know, to think about what's happening there and what has happened there. It's really humbling.
Crew-10, your ride awaits. And it's a bit of a process as the vehicles will park on the pad. The crew will get out. They'll go up the elevators in the launch tower to the left, and then they'll have to climb some stairs to get to the final top level where they'll go across the crew access arm and into their spacecraft. We've got two mission specialists to talk about still. Let's hear from JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, one of Crew-10's mission specialists.
When people are born, they naturally want to explore their environment. That's how we expand our world, and that's how we find something new, advance our technology and civilization. My name is Takuya Onishi, and I am a mission specialist for NASA's SpaceX Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station. I was born in Tokyo, in Japan, and I grew up mostly in the west part of Japan. My family moved our locations so often, so that experience actually helped me to get used to a new environment quickly and comfortably. I have always been interested in space since my childhood, but I never thought I would actually become an astronaut. I chose to become a pilot. I think I was very lucky because the experiences as a pilot of a commercial airplane really helped me to go through astronaut selection process. Space is hard, very challenging, sometimes unpredictable, and there is no 100% guarantee of success. And that's why I think cooperation is the key to success. Each country, each crew member, each agency, each company brings its own expertise and its strength in order to be able to cooperate as a team. And I hope our Crew-10 mission becomes one of the best models of that cooperation. We've been training together more than a year. I believe we can be very successful in our goals and build a closer friendship among all of us. And of course, most importantly, have a lot of fun together. While we are on board the ISS, we are going to perform a lot of scientific experiments, including some medical experiments to better understand our bodies and for future space exploration. Our ultimate goal is to go to Mars, but it's not an easy journey, and when we face a new challenge, we must solve it step by step. Continue pushing the boundary of possibility makes us gain new skills and also enhance our experiences. What I like about the International Station program is each country brings its own strengths. It's like a patchwork quilt. Each country is just one patch. Putting all the patches together creates one beautiful quilt that is ISS.
The other mission specialist is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov. Let's hear from him now.
I think that we explore because it's a really deep part of our nature. This is one of main things that makes us humans. My name is Kirill Peskov. I am a mission specialist for NASA's SpaceX Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station. I grew up in a Siberian town called Nazarovo. It's in the middle of Russia, in the middle of Siberia. I decided to be a pilot. Actually, this was my dream during my childhood. And after becoming a pilot, I realized that it's not a limit and we can go higher and further. So I started to work towards becoming a cosmonaut, and now I'm standing here. Our crew is great. I love the fact about our crew that all four of us are pilots. I think that it helps us to understand each other really well, sometimes even without saying a word. Every day we learn something new about each other. The training itself, this is the thing which brings us closer. We do science in space because it's an environment that cannot be created on the ground, and it helps us to develop all kinds of materials, medicines. It helps us to push our knowledge forward. I think doing research is not only on station, but everywhere is somewhere deep inside in human nature. And this hunger for exploration, this is one of the main things which drives us forward and helps us to survive as a species. I think it's hard to overestimate the value of international cooperation in space exploration because it takes much time and effort represented by how much money spent to space exploration. So like more people and more ideas we have, faster the exploration goes and safer and better our life on Earth becomes. I love the space exploration because it's the endless process. When I became a cosmonaut, I was surprised how big this team is. The team who makes these flights possible. It is like thousands and millions of people, and what I would say is to say thank you, not only for aerospace industries, industry agencies, but also for all the people who are involved in creating something and in different kinds of research. You are making the world better.
And there you see our commander and pilot making their way out to their ride, pumping fists.
I always
quite happy.
I always love this shot when they lean back and try to get their helmets out of the way to really look up and take in how tall that rocket is. Because once they get into those elevators, you know, they just lose the context and perspective of that view that they have right now.
And there they are sharing it together, arm in arm. That's got to be a great moment for them. I imagine Anne is probably taking a moment to pray.
Yeah, there is a lot going on right now in terms of, you know, thinking about all of the preparation that's gone into this and these final moments as you're looking up at the rocket and getting ready to board that elevator. And I can no doubt be sure that Anne is providing some inspirational leadership words as well, because those are the things that she is just natural at. The other thing I love about that elevator is that button that they're going to push to bring them up to the top to get onto the rocket is actually labeled space. There's no floor number, it just says space. So hit that space button and you're ready to go.
It's a nice touch once you get in the elevator. But I think it's also kind of funny that when you get out of the elevator, because of the way that Pad 39A was designed initially for not only Apollo missions, but also space shuttle missions, they have to climb one more set of stairs to get up to the level that takes them to space.
Space almost.
There you go. They'll pop out right there when those doors open up. And pulling again on this theme of the 4 pilots, as we see the 2 mission specialists, also pilots, do their rocket recline. I was struck by what Anne McClain said in a press conference when she said, you know, as pilots, as she ascends the stairs along with Nichole Ayers that we were just talking about, they like to do the pre-flight check, right? Check out the aircraft, look at all the compartments, check the logbooks, maintenance books. But they rely on a very large team to do that when you go to space, because as pilots, they can't do that in this situation. They have to rely on the men and women of NASA and SpaceX to get this equipment ready to go.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that for us as astronauts is so important, and it makes these roles that we have on the ground even more meaningful. You know, we talked about Talk's experience as a flight director, we talked about all the various different ground positions that we serve as astronauts, and all of those things are so valuable, mostly because you get to know the people that are working on every system and every aspect of your mission. And we develop this camaraderie and this trust in those people. And that is, I think, you know, the number one thing that puts your mind at ease. You know, people always ask us as astronauts, are you afraid? You know, what are you thinking in those moments? And really the answer is we're not afraid, because we rely on this incredible training that we have and all of these people on the ground. We know that safety is their number one priority, and we trust them implicitly. Because as you mentioned, we don't have the knowledge.
Crew is at the right room, on schedule.
We don't really have, you know, the time or the know-how to inspect all these things ourselves. And so we do 100% rely on the NASA and the SpaceX teams. And
we see some of those team members, the more visible ones there on your screen, as the mission specialists come out of the elevators and make their way up the stairs. We just saw Commander Anne McClain and pilot Nichole Ayers getting into the White Room right on time. And now mission specialists Takuya Onishi and Kirill Peskov will make their way up to the top of the launch tower. And as you were talking, I was reminded that you have an interesting story about a couple of the astronauts regarding being up this high.
I do. You know, maybe we don't need to mention any names, but there are actually astronauts in our office that have quite a strong fear of heights. May or may not be 75% of this crew actually right now. Something again that they really share in common and find strength in together.
Once you're in the spacecraft and it's articulated into flight position, they won't have to worry about feeling that.
Yeah, it's interesting because they are all pilots, so they're certainly well accustomed to it for sure. And I think that's one of the things that our training does for us. It allows us to just be operators and overcome any of those pre-existing fears.
Okay, Anne and Nichole are getting ready to ingress to the spacecraft, and there goes Anne.
Countdown. Ingress start.
Making sure not to bump the door, which has a very important seal around it that keeps their environment on the inside and space on the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. Even just one small hair, you can see that's why everybody is so carefully, everything's contained with their hair and their face and everything, not just for the quarantine, but also just that white room environment to make sure that nothing gets in the way that could break that seal.
Here come Kirill and Takuya. Big waves, pumping fists. They're ready to go. Into the white room they go, where they will sign that NASA meatball that you see on the side.
Yeah, there it is, another one of the traditions.
While we're in this moment, we want to take a social question now. If you have a question, please jump on to our social platforms. Use the hashtag AskNASA. Send us a question. Jessica will be doing the answering. She's the expert. And we have our first question now. JVO 9000 asks, how do astronauts deal with stress or anxiety prior, during, and possibly post-launch?
Well, that's a pertinent question. I think it really goes to what we were just talking about. Because we have this incredible training and this network of personnel that we rely on, we don't really feel that kind of fear or stress so much because we have so much of this real muscle memory just kind of baked in there. And I think that helps you operate above any latent stress or anxiety. I mean, of course we're humans. Of course we have all the same emotions as everybody else. But when you have that really extensive training and this trust in the hardware and trust in the ground teams, it allows you to be an effective operator and operate beyond that. I was actually talking about this with Anne's mother just today. For us, the launch process is really not that stressful. It's really much harder, much more difficult for the loved ones and the families on the ground because they don't have that same level of training. They don't know exactly what to expect the whole way. They don't necessarily have that trust in the hardware like we do. So they're the ones that I think this day is so stressful for, not necessarily us as astronauts.
How about that? I've heard other astronauts say that all of that training, just like you mentioned, it is muscle memory. They have done it so many times that it feels like on launch day, just part of the training.
Yeah, and it was certainly like that for me on my launch. People always ask what you felt like, and we had been through that entire sequence so many times in the really high fidelity simulators that we trained in Russia that I almost had to remind myself that the end of the day was going to be different. I was actually not going to go home to the cottage for dinner. Only after about 8 minutes. And then you hear things. You feel the rocket move a little bit. You hear a groan from the fuel system, and those are the things that are like,
Aha.
Wait a minute, this is a little bit different.
We've got another social question. This one directly to you, Jessica, about your experience. What was your favorite place on Earth to see, presumably when you were up at the International Space Station?
Yeah, that's a tough one to pick just one because this vantage point that we have is so unique and special. I think some of the things that I wasn't really aware of were, for example, all of the different colors and textures of the dunes. So if you look in Africa or in the Middle East especially, all these different colors and textures and crazy intricate shapes that I was really not that prepared for. You know, it's if you zoom in with a 400 millimeter lens, it's like a modern art. It's like you're going to a modern art museum and capturing all of these images. It is it's really just jaw-dropping. I really also liked seeing all the currents, the way the water swirls, especially in the coastal regions, the different color swaths that you see, the glaciers, coral reefs, around. I had been diving in the Great Barrier Reef a few years before my mission, so it was really cool to see the reefs off of Australia, the Patagonia ice fields, another favorite spot of mine, where these like glacial tongues kind of come down, and you see these high-altitude turquoise lakes, and it reminds you how beautiful the planet is. And there are so many places that I know now that I need to explore that I know weren't even necessarily on my list before my mission.
And you saw Antarctica, a place where you did a lot of research.
Yeah, given the latitude, given the inclination of the space station, we don't get an incredible view of the Antarctic, unfortunately. I wish that we did, but you can see the Southern Ocean and a little bit in the distance.
Now we've got the crew all in their seats inside Dragon Endurance.
Yeah, they're clipping into those 5-point harnesses, making sure that everything is secure, and you can see they're getting some help from the SpaceX team just to make sure that everything is lined up correctly. They're going to be comfortable, they're going to be safe in that environment as they're waiting for launch. It's still there. It's softer.
All right, once the crew gets settled into Dragon, we will start hearing a lot more chatter on the mission loops. That's because the crew will have to participate in different communication checks. We'll also see a test of their suits again, a second test. We saw this in the suit-up room, but they will repressurize the suits. From left to right, we have Kirill Peskov, mission specialist, Nichole Ayers, the pilot. To her right, Commander Anne McClain. And on the far right, Takuya Onishi.
Yeah, and you can see that the SpaceX personnel are passing them some cue cards that they can use, for monitoring the different phases after liftoff along the ascent corridor and all the different aspects, all the different stages of the flight profile, so they can really make sure that they're monitoring the correct information. Obviously, they've been through this in many, many simulations before, but always good to have those reminders about what you're looking for when. You can see the control displays are really just above Anne and Nicole's heads there, so we can't actually see the displays themselves, but once they're looking up, they'll be able to monitor all of the displays that they're tracking.
All 4 seats will articulate up into launch position, as you mentioned, and then they'll have access to their screens, their heads-up displays. But it's time to suit up right now. They held off putting those gloves on until this moment.
Yeah, making those final preparations. You can see they have a footrest there as well, and so the bottom of the boot actually has a little divot in it, so there's a little mechanism that they can slide their heel onto to help keep their heels in place as well, keep their feet in place.
Kind of like a bike shoe?
Yeah, a little bit like that. Lots of zippers. You need to make sure that you have good integrity in all of those closures to make sure that you can maintain your pressure in any possible emergency when we need to pressurize those suits. Of course, that's the reason why we wear these pressure suits. If for any reason you had a depressurization of the vehicle, then that suit would be able to maintain pressure to keep you alive, delivering all of the necessary life function. So they're getting oxygen through that suit. They have their communication lines into that suit.
And we've seen that suit flight proven in a more recent mission, a private mission where they depressurized the capsule intentionally and allowed one of the private astronauts to go out and do a spacewalk. In fact, he is now NASA administrator.
Yeah, that's right. There were two other crew members in the Polaris Dawn mission that did that spacewalk. That was the first private spacewalk, and it was a slightly different version of this suit. It's not exactly the same suit, so they did actually develop a new suit, new version, so that we had a suit that was capable of doing a spacewalk. In space vehicles, we wear these launch and entry suits, and that's mostly a pressurization suit, as we mentioned, for maintaining the pressure if you had a vehicle depressurization. Not necessarily the same thing that you would use to do an entire spacewalk, because you need different levels of protection and different functions for that.
We've got two views here. On the right, Crew-10 seated in their capsule Endurance. And on the left, the small box, you can see our flight team here at the Kennedy Space Center orbiting the pad with what has been a spectacular day so far and will continue to be. Just beautiful outside. Temperature in the 70s. Winds are calm. You see a few waves breaking off in the distance. I was out there on the beach this morning. It was beautiful, wonderful sunrise.
You can see one of the windows there just by Talk's head as well, and that's one of the cool differences between Dragon and from the Soyuz ride that I experienced. The Soyuz actually has a fairing that covers it until you've lifted off, so you can't see, you don't actually see out the window when you're lifting off. But with the Dragon, you actually have a view as you're clearing the launch pad, so something that's pretty unique, and then starting to see the coast of Florida as you disappear and get kind of further and further up there. Those windows are actually great viewpoints for viewing all things really from space, especially the aurora. You've probably seen some of the amazing photographs that astronauts have taken, particularly Don Pettit, who's up there right now, an incredibly skilled photographer.
Oh, he's done a great job, hasn't he?
Yeah, his time lapses of the aurora and star trails are really exceptional, and several of them now are taken from these Dragon windows.
How about that? He goes into the Dragon to get that shot.
Yeah, there are lots of different windows for pictures. We have our cupola. There are some windows in the Russian segment. There's a window called Wharf in the lab that has really good optical quality, and then we have these Dragon windows as well.
And folks, if you have any questions for astronaut Jessica Meir, who's been to space, done work on the International Space Station, was part of a historic spacewalk with fellow astronaut Christina Cook back in 2019. Just send your question with the hashtag AskNASA to our social media accounts on Facebook, Twitch, X. She's taken a few questions already and done a fantastic job with it.
I've also heard that because of those windows and the lack of a fairing cover like the Soyuz has, it's actually quite a bit louder in terms of the sounds that you experience as you're lifting off the launch pad.
Not as insulated.
Yeah. So that'll be a comparison for Anne and for Talk as well, since they've both ridden on the Soyuz.
Right. But for our pilot, Nichole Ayers, and our mission specialist, Kirill Peskov, it will be all brand new.
Yeah.
And I hear the NASA astronauts and the veterans of spaceflight enjoy watching a first-time astronaut get their first flight.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like do anything in life, right? No matter what it is, over time you might get a little bit jaded by it or kind of forget how special it is. I think about that a lot when I give tours to people at NASA. You walk into these buildings, which you're in pretty much every day, and then you bring someone in who sees it for the first time of their eyes, and then you remember how special and cool it is what you're actually doing. And I think that's really important, right? Sometimes you need to really take that step back and have that perspective. Now, certainly there's nothing mundane about going to space, whether it's the first, second, third, or fourth time. But Anne and I talked a little bit about that before this launch, about how differently it'll feel. And I think for me and from other people that I've talked to, my first memories of the first few days in space are really pretty hazy. And I think that's because your brain is just simply overwhelmed. You're navigating now in this three-dimensional volume, which is entirely different. You're physically having these new neural networks in your brain that are forming. And you see the experienced flyers, they come in and they're a little bit more graceful from the beginning, and I think that's just biology. Those neural networks in their brain are already formed, and even if it's been 5, 10, 15 years since they've been in space, they're suddenly reactivated and they're just able to deal with it from the beginning. So I was wondering, I asked Anne to pay attention to that. Your memory of those early moments will probably be more clear than it was the first time, just because it's not as new and not perhaps quite as overwhelming.
That's fascinating. And she mentioned, she was asked by the press what she would do different on station. And her response was to really enjoy the in-between moments more, really savor it. Because, as you just mentioned, when you first go up, and the biology behind it, it all races by. So she said she wants to be intentional about taking these moments to really savor being up in space. Never know if you're going to be able to go up again.
Yeah, that's incredible advice, and something I think about a lot as well. I remember having that conversation with my commander, Luca Parmitano, and it was his second flight. And I remember him telling me that there were so many things from his first flight that he didn't really remember because, again, your brain is so overwhelmed. You're so, you're thinking, please don't mess up, please don't make a mistake, and you're thinking about the next thing or the intensity of what it is that you're about to do, and so you're kind of forgetting to just enjoy that moment and appreciate that moment. And in doing so, he thought that really affected the way that he remembered the mission, because if your brain is just spending so much time thinking about those other things, you're not really fully comprehending and appreciating the moment that you're in, and so the memory is not really seared in there in the way that you might want to remember that. So that's definitely some advice that I'll be taking if when I go back to space, because you just need to really, as they say, stop and smell the roses, make those moments, because those are the things you want to remember. And the space flight, when you're up there, I was up there for almost 7 months. It seemed like a long time, but relative to the amount of time I've been here on Earth, it was very, very short. And now, I've been back for 5 years, and it feels almost like it was a dream. It's hard to believe that it actually happened, because it's just so different and extraordinary compared to everything else you've done your whole life.
I really enjoy you talking about this, Jessica. It's fascinating to me, and I'm sure to the audience. If you are just joining us, you are watching live launch coverage of Crew-10, NASA and SpaceX's 10th operational mission to the International Space Station. We are T-minus 2 hours and 34 minutes until liftoff. The crew woke up, had their medical checks, got their breakfast in, their favorite meal. They were transported out to the launch pad after suiting up at astronaut crew quarters. They ascended the launch tower and into their spacecraft, and now you see them there live. The view on the right, the Crew-10 astronauts, cosmonaut, and the JAXA astronaut. And on the left, you see the closeout crew doing their work, getting ready to close the hatch on the Endurance spacecraft. This is a very careful process, because any small amount of debris, even as small as a human hair, if it gets in that hatch, the seal, it could cause a leak. So the crew is methodical as they go through their steps to make sure that seal is in pristine condition.
Yeah, luckily we will do that pressure check one more time, and we'll do that pressure check of the capsule itself as well. So we'll know, before we lift off, we'll know that we'll make sure that we verify we have that integrity. And that has actually delayed launches a little bit in the past, where we've found something in the seal, and they've had to find it and still been able to move on and lift off as planned. We talk about what the crew's been doing. We, as astronauts, actually sleep shift before these missions, depending on what time our launch is, depending on how long the phasing will be to get to the space station, because of course we want to make sure that we can arrive and be pretty well rested. It makes for a really long day. The crew actually, their official wake-up time was at noon today, so they've been kind of adjusted to this sleeping in, staying up late schedule, which is perfect for people like Anne and myself. We were made for that, so banker's hours here for them.
I love it. I get up early. I enjoy getting up early, but this is a perfect mission timeline for folks like yourself and Anne. I mean, it is fantastic. And we're going to have a beautiful view tonight. I am really looking forward to this because we will be launching at 7:48 and 57 seconds p.m. Eastern Time, and that is right after sunset. It will be twilight out. And when the spacecraft and the rocket get up a certain distance and altitude, the light really plays with the exhaust from the rocket. Some people call it the jellyfish effect, but you get this tremendous visual of the rocket going into space, and it sometimes creates light patterns that are unforgettable.
Yeah, it was about the same time of day when I took off on my mission, and everybody described it as being such an incredibly gorgeous time. Spectacular, really, to be there viewing it, given that changing light, as you were mentioning, for twilight. So this should be quite a show here for everybody that's gathered in Florida today to see it.
And as we look at the crew inside their spacecraft Endurance, another question coming to us on social. Jack Frost asks, not sure if it's the real Jack Frost, because it's not that cold here. Why are they getting in the rocket so early before launch, 2.5 hours?
Yeah, so for all space missions, we really kind of have to backtrack the amount of time it takes to do all the things that we require to launch on time. So we want to make sure that we have enough time in the timeline to get the crew safely into their seats, to get them all strapped in, to do all the pressure checks that we talked about, to make sure that their suits have good pressure integrity, good comm checks, to make sure all the systems are functioning normally, to shut the hatch, and again do that another pressure test to make sure that we have good pressure integrity for the vehicle. So for this particular vehicle, the way that this timeline has worked out for the crew gets them in the vehicle, about 3 hours before launch. It certainly has a little bit of padding in there too, because sometimes you might have something slightly off nominal, not according to plan. Maybe you have to address an issue with a suit or something like that. But this is a pretty finely honed timeline, and now that we've had several of these missions, it has changed a little bit over time, but I would say this is probably the maximized timeline in order to shorten the crew day for the reasons that we were talking about earlier, to make sure that they're rested for the long day that they have ahead. Make sure that we have enough time to accomplish everything safely and successfully.
And on that timeline, this is an area, as you mentioned, where they do have a little extra margin. Oftentimes, if everything goes according to plan, they'll have a little extra time there in the capsule. The upcoming milestones we are looking for as we zoom out from inside the spacecraft and right back in, with a big thumbs up from the crew. Those seats will be articulating upwards, and they are doing so now, putting them in launch position. This will allow the commander and pilot to have access to their displays that you see just above them. This is also helpful to the astronauts who can't spend forever on your back. It's a comfortable position, I'm sure, but there are...
Exec's seats are in the launch position.
There are concerns that, and I know this from the Artemis missions, that you can only spend so much time on your back. So with SpaceX and the late load, it's very convenient. It's a very short amount of time that they spend on their back before going up into space. And now we're getting some of those comm checks.
Can see those long giraffe legs with good view right there.
There it is. Jessica mentioning something that we saw at the beginning of the launch broadcast. If you want to scroll back and take a look at that, they have unofficial logo on their shirts. I believe they were wearing them in a press conference. They had their flight suits on, so I couldn't see underneath, but it was the same peach color that you showed, but it was basically a graphic of 3 giraffes and 1 panda. And each one of those animals was assigned one of the crew members, and Anne McClain got the panda.
The pandas are actually my favorite animal,
yes.
From the time that I was a very small child, so I kind of like how that worked out. And certainly not short. I think she's 5'7", but there it is. There's the logo. The rest of her crew is exceptionally tall in the astronaut corps, so when Anne stands with them, she comes off a little bit more panda-like, I would say.
So the next few milestones we should see.
Dragon, SpaceX, you are go for Section 2, suit leak check preparation.
That's right, is suit leak check. This is the second of the day.
Copies, we are go for Section 2, suit leak check prep.
So you will, after that brief initial comm check, they will suit leak check. And so you will see the suits inflate. They'll put their visors down. And then when that is complete, they'll do a full complement of communication checks with each one of the crew members. But right now it's suit leak check. So they are about to inflate. As we await this this next milestone, I want to go back to what you were talking about in the memories of being in space, and how clear are the memories of your spacewalk when you were outside the space station, dangling in essence, looking down at the planet. Did you have a moment where you were able to just take it all in, to pause?
Yeah, again, as we were talking about earlier, you have to be intentional about stealing a few of those moments for yourselves, especially when it comes to spacewalks. Spacewalks are the riskiest thing that we do. They're the most challenging, both mentally and physically. So it really does demand 100% of your focus and concentration to make sure that you are doing the right thing for the piece of hardware that you're trying to repair or replace, or whatever the task is that you're doing, and most importantly, to keep you and your partner safe. So that really demands a very, very high level of concentration. And, the astronaut mantra is always kind of echoing in your head of like, don't make a mistake, don't make a mistake. So you have to remember, you get very caught up in the task and the minutia of what you're doing.
SpaceX Dragon, Section 2, 2.9, tier complete, ready for leak checks.
So there were a few moments that I did. I thought, okay, I need to look down. I need to appreciate
SpaceX
this.
copies. You are go for Section 3, suit leak check.
Please go for Section 3, suit leak check.
And one of those moments was when I was actually in the foot restraint that we have that you really secures you in one position, and I was working with one of the batteries that we had, and Christina was below me, and as I looked down, I saw the view. We were actually coming over those Patagonia ice fields that I was describing earlier, which is one of my favorite spots, and I remember seeing that and just waiting for a second and thinking, okay, wow, this is pretty extraordinary, That first moment you come out of the hatch as well, when you see your boots below you and then nothing else until Earth. And that's certainly different than the way that we train in the pool, where you see the bottom of the pool always.
Right.
And that, it's really, of course, but the sense of movement and motion that you have is that the Earth is spinning very quickly below you. And it's really an extraordinary feeling. I remember as well, Christina and I were under the airlock. We had a moment, so had a pause, and we flew right over San Diego, where I went to graduate school. And so we took a moment there to make a shout out to all of my friends and colleagues that lived there. But, really easy to pick out those coastal cities because you have those landmarks when you're looking down at the Earth and you don't have the benefit of the borders drawn on a map. A lot of times geography can be pretty challenging. So those coastal areas are the easy ones to pick out. Depending on what you're doing on a spacewalk, though, there can actually be pretty long opportunities that you have to appreciate the moment. And I was really jealous. I remember when I was inside flying the robotic arm, Luca Parmitano and Drew Morgan were doing a spacewalk to fix the AMS, the alpha magnetic spectrometer. And there was this one period of time where Luca was just riding the end of the Canadarm, the robotic arm on the space station built by the Canadian Space Agency, and he was just riding it for a very long time. He wasn't holding anything, he was just riding it and really looking off into the solar system and the universe. And if you know Luca, he's a talker, and he started getting quite philosophical as well and talking about what he saw and how he felt. And I was always very envious of that opportunity because I didn't have one of those natural lengths of downtime where you had really the opportunity to do that. But you never know. On my next flight, hopefully I'll have one of those as well.
Well, I hope so for you as well, because it just sounds spectacular. What an honor and a privilege to be able to do that. Well, it looks like we're getting some inflation, right? Whenever the helmet starts to ride up the face, means we got some pressure in there.
Yep.
Another social question for you, Jessica. Zryan Dox asks, what happens if the astronauts felt the need to scratch? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that is
Hope
a
they're not
good
listening.
question. Good question, and unfortunately, often there isn't a lot that you can do. You can see right now they're already finished up with those pressure checks, so it wasn't a very long time. You saw Kirill actually reached right in and scratched his nose, so he looked like he did have something like that.
SpaceX Dragon, suit leak check complete for nominal suits.
SpaceX copies and concurs for good suits. Additionally, at this time, I have an update on the hydraulics issue that LD briefed during the weather briefing, if you're ready to copy. All right. The hardware is healthy, but we are currently still evaluating system performance. We want to provide an update no later than T-minus 1 hour. If additional time is needed, the final call just needs to be made prior to LES arm, but still expect an update from us no later than T-minus 1 hour. How copy?
Can we copy the update? We'll expect an update prior to 1 hour and understand the constraint with the LAS Army. Thank you.
So we've mentioned this at the top of the launch broadcast and another time not long after that the crew, SpaceX team on the ground is evaluating an issue with hydraulics.
Dragon SpaceX at this time. Closeout team will perform final closeout steps next to the capsule. Your go to proceed to Section 4, side hatch close, and report when ready to close the hatch.
Dragon copies, Section 4 and work.
So that applies to the team on the left, to the call out that you just heard, as they ready to close the side hatch for Dragon. But back to the brief that was just given to the Crew-10 crew regarding the hydraulics on the ground, and they are currently looking at an issue that is related to hydraulic lines or a hydraulic issue with the clamp arm that holds the Falcon 9 rocket to the transporter erector. Again, there's an issue with the hydraulics related to the clamp arms, and there you see them, and that holds the rocket to the transporter erector. They're evaluating an issue with the hydraulics in one of those clamp arms. So they're working through the data, evaluating the situation. They're going to take some more time to look at this, and told the crew that they will give them an update in about an hour, but they have to make a call on which way this will go, whether they build flight rationale to go ahead and fly, or if it's something that would require us to stand down for the day. That will be something that they are discussing right now, but they can make that final call just before the arming of the launch escape system. We just completed suit leak checks. Crew-10 is in their seats. Moving forward.
Yeah, and to finish off that last question about what happens if you get an itch when you've got your visor closed.
Yes.
So different spacesuits have, different interiors. If you think about the EMU, the extravehicular mobility unit, that's the spacesuit that we use for our spacewalks on the International Space Station. There are a couple things that you can maybe use to itch a little bit if you have something on your nose or somewhere on your face. There's a Valsalva device that's actually mounted on the visor, and that helps you clear your ears when you're changing pressure. So sometimes if you have an itch, especially on your chin or nose, you can kind of wiggle your face down to clear it that way, to scratch it a little bit with that Valsalva device. You also have a little, like the nipple for a camelback water reservoir. It's kind of like that, but it's mounted on the inside of our spacesuit, and you can use that to try to get at us, to scratch that itch if you have one.
One of the factors that they're looking at on launch day, of course, is the weather, and it couldn't be much better than this. 95% go, winds 12 to 17 miles per hour out of the southeast, temperature 67 degrees expected at launch time. We're in the 70s as we speak, and it has just been delightful outside. SpaceX and NASA not only look at weather at the launch site, though, but also around the world, making sure conditions are acceptable if Dragon has to splash down in the Atlantic in case of an emergency. So, of course, teams are monitoring contingency splashdown locations if the crew had to come back to Earth before docking with the space station. If this were to happen, SpaceX and NASA would coordinate with the Department of Defense and the Coast Guard to ensure crew safety upon splashdown, including ships and air assets to patrol the 10 nautical mile keep-out zone. This is, of course, to mitigate safety concerns for any boaters approaching the area. The weather brief that they got at the top of the launch broadcast was that conditions along the ascent corridor were good. They did have some winds that were teetering right on the line, but they were expecting them to go down. And how about that? What a beautiful view. A nice sailboat off in the distance, though I'm wondering if that is okay.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it.
Looks like it might be a violation, and I know that that actually prevented a few or delayed a few shuttle launches in the past, didn't it? Right, boats that were in the area that weren't supposed to be there. It did indeed.
I can tell you with a fair amount of certainty that as lovely as a day as it is to be out sailing, they are not supposed to be in that location. Now, the area is cleared by the range, so we'll wait for an update from the range to find out what the situation is there.
See, there's not a cloud in the sky, so that's another nice nice feature for the viewing today. You know, sometimes if there are a few clouds interspersed, you lose your view for a minute or two once it gets above that cloud later, but that should not be a concern for today.
Yeah. The high pressure system that's in the area literally swept out all the moisture and storms that we had earlier in the week. We had a cold front pass through on Tuesday, or Monday rather.
Dragon SpaceX for hydraulic checks. Just giving an update that they're about to start an additional set of kinematics tests on the hydraulic system, so you may feel or hear some valves clicking, but this is expected.
Thanks for the heads up.
So SpaceX informing the crew that they will be hearing some noise as SpaceX cycles hydraulic valves. This is a situation that they are evaluating in this moment.
Dragon SpaceX closeout team is taking final steps in prep for side hatch closure. Stand by for transition to pad hatch closed. Ensure all items remain secure from now through launch.
Copy.
And there you see the crew closing the hatch. But again, back to the hydraulic issue, SpaceX cycling those valves as they work an issue with some ground equipment, the hydraulic lines, and the system that feeds the clamp arms, which holds the rocket to the pad. A note about that boat that we saw earlier, there is still plenty of time to clear the range. And so I don't know this for sure, but it's possible that the boat may be getting a visit, but certainly could get out of there. There are notices that are put out called NOTAMs. They are notices to mariners and aviators in the area that lets them know that a launch will be going off this evening. And the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, the 45th Space Wing, has the responsibility for the range. And of course, again, plenty of time to clear the range before liftoff. Currently sitting at T-minus 2 hours and 10 minutes and counting. You're watching live launch coverage of NASA and SpaceX's Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station. 2 hours ago, the crew made their way out of astronaut crew quarters. After they suited up, they got into their rides, drove out to the launch pad, ascended the launch tower, walked across the crew access arm and into the Dragon Endurance capsule that you see there. The Endurance spacecraft currently on its 4th flight. The flight leader in the fleet currently. The crew is now inside the capsule, and the team there at SpaceX performing some leak checks to make sure the capsule is airtight. We've been taking your social media questions throughout our live launch coverage. Keep them coming. Hashtag AskNASA on Facebook, X, YouTube, and Twitch. Our next question comes from Spooky Sniper asking, Jessica, what's one challenge of spaceflight that most people don't really think about?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is the challenge that we face when we come back home, because you've been operating in this really intense, novel, exciting environment for 6 months, 7 months in my case, even longer for some of the recent missions. And you're every day you're intertwined with all of the systems of the space station, all the experiments, everything that's going on. And it's, your participation, all the work that you're doing is critical and crucial to the success of those experiments, to keeping the space station alive and healthy. And there's a lot of meaning in your work. You have these very busy days that are all laid out and planned by the ground teams. And then you leave the space station and the transition is quite sudden. You come back, you have to contend with gravity again, which doesn't feel great for your body. And you think about it, you're thinking, well, wait a minute, I left and somehow the space station's up there still doing just fine with another crew that's taking care of it, but you're personally no longer connected to it and responsible for those everyday operations. And it's quite a difference from when you come back. And I think especially for astronauts on their first missions, I've talked to quite a few astronauts
Dragon
about
SpaceX, are you ready for comm checks with MD, LD, and DC?
SpaceX Dragon, ready for comm check.
Copy. I'll initiate the teacher's comm check. Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX Dragon, loud and clear.
Core, loud and clear. Teacher's comm check complete. Stand by for comm checks with DC, MD, and LD in the launch configuration.
Dragon, DC on countdown 1, comm check.
DC Dragon, loud and clear.
DC, loud and clear. Stand by for comm checks with MD.
Dragon, MD on countdown 1, comm check.
MD Dragon, loud and clear.
MD loud and clear, stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. Dragon, MD on Dragon to ground, comm check.
MD Dragon, loud and clear.
MD loud and clear, stand by for comm checks with LD.
Dragon, LD on countdown 1, comm check.
LD Dragon, loud and clear.
LD loud and clear, stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. Dragon, LD on Dragon to ground, comm check.
LD Dragon, also loud and clear.
LD loud and clear.
Dragon, SpaceX, launch configuration comm checks complete.
Dragon, SpaceX Dragon, copy.
Yeah, so to wrap up that last question, when you returned from spaceflight, some astronauts, including myself, have kind of had this feeling of aimlessness almost. You've just accomplished this number one goal that you've had, this dream you've had your entire life from the time that I was 5 years old, from my perspective. And I actually returned at the time of COVID, so it was coming back to a completely different planet. But finding again, your purpose and your mission it's probably something that most people don't think about when they think about the challenges of spaceflight.
All right, we are T-minus 2 hours and 5 minutes and counting until liftoff of NASA and SpaceX's Crew-10 mission to the International Space Station, an incredible orbiting lab, and of course, their final destination for Crew-10. Let's take a closer look now at how we're getting help here on Earth from all of that revolutionary science and research being done up in low Earth orbit.
The International Space Station isn't just a symbol. It's a powerhouse of cutting-edge science, constantly revealing secrets that defy Earth's limitations and drive us farther into the cosmos.
Our mission is research and science. We have experiments mounted on the outside of the station that are looking at Earth. We study our own bodies and how they react to space, to weightlessness, to radiation. And that helps not only us go on further in future missions, but also helps for medical research back home. And then we study lots of different things as well, like materials, combustion, all sorts of things that help us understand life back on Earth.
Yeah!
Microgravity doesn't play by the rules. It flips them upside down, transforming how liquids flow, how flames burn, and unraveling biological mysteries before our eyes.
I saw some heart tissues beating in space, and it was incredible. photon, we see that top one beating. Looks like happy heart cells.
But we're not just along for the ride. We're explorers, diving headfirst into the challenge and harnessing the power of this unparalleled platform, just as we have been for decades. We're on a relentless quest for answers, seeking to understand the intricate workings of the human body in space and ensuring future crews stay safe on their daring journeys beyond Earth's orbit.
The human aspect of human space exploration is always going to be very important for decades to come.
And when it comes to technology, we're not waiting around. We're discovering new ways to grow crops in harsh environments and engineering innovations to tackle Earth's greatest challenges.
We have amazing technology that allows us to recycle water and create water for us to drink. It's delicious.
Microgravity isn't just a curiosity, it's a game changer in the fight against diseases back on Earth, paving the way for breakthroughs that benefit us all and enabling new economic opportunities in space.
Welcome, Axiom 3 on board the International Space Station.
From our vantage point more than 200 miles above Earth, we are not just spectators. We're gaining unprecedented insights into the world we call home, and we're sharing our findings openly. We're not just achieving results today. We're sparking inspiration in future generations of explorers and embracing the power of global collaboration as we reach for the stars.
What was your favorite experiment on the International Space Station?
Toby, great question. My favorite experiment was the one that I got to eat. It was us growing hatch chili peppers in our plant habitat.
Station Huntsville on 2, we have video in Node 1. Look at those chili peppers.
And as we soar through space at 17,500 miles per hour, each moment is a step closer to unlocking the mysteries of our Earth, our universe, and propelling our pioneering spirit even farther into space. So come along for the ride aboard the International Space Station.
Seeing all that footage from up at the ISS, I'm sure brings back a lot of fond memories.
Absolutely, especially as a scientist for me. I get very excited about our role as astronauts in conducting these scientific experiments. It's so rewarding to know that you're really helping science progress, and you're the person up there as the operator and or subject to help gather all this valuable data for the teams. I know that for this mission we have a lot of different scientific experiments, just a few that we could mention. There are a few that will be actually performed in Dragon, so in that phase of flight before getting to space station, and a few others on the space station. Starting off with those in Dragon, there's an experiment called Space Health. It's a Canadian Space Agency experiment where the astronauts are wearing these biomonitors. So it's a wearable technology garment that's looking namely at cardiovascular variables, so what's going on with our heart, and a lot of important factors to see what happens in microgravity. We have such a big difference in our physiological systems if we don't necessarily have gravity, which is pulling our blood and body fluids down to our feet. That leads us to the second one, an experiment called Thigh Cuff. This is a relatively new experiment where the astronauts that are participating will be wearing this kind of restrictive band around their thighs, and that it will help reduce the blood flow, it'll change the way that fluid shift is happening, where once you get in microgravity, you have this upward fluid shift, less blood in your legs, more in your upper torso and in your face. You can kind of see that in some of the astronauts, especially in the beginning when they're up there before you have a kind of compensation for that. And these fluid shifts may be part of the reason why we're having problems with our eyes. Many astronauts are coming back with some deficits to their vision and even some anatomical changes to the back of the eye. It's a syndrome called SANS, Spaceflight Associated Neuroocular Syndrome. So this thigh cuff experiment will provide a lot of data to see if this could be used as a countermeasure to help counteract some of those effects. There's also an experiment called immunity assay, which is a new way to monitor health and immune function with a blood sample in space. So this is looking at a new assay that can be conducted in flight instead of what we usually do is obtain a blood sample and then we have to wait until that blood sample makes its way back to the ground before we can really get a good look to understand what's going on there. once they're on ISS, some of the astronauts will be participating in the CIPHER study, and this is a very comprehensive physiological suite. It's a multidisciplinary study looking at physiological and psychological factors, and it's 14 different studies all wrapped into one big blanket. And it's really looking at comparing and contrasting long-duration missions in the future, missions of different durations, and getting a really comprehensive understanding of all of those different physiological systems, again, with some of the applications to SANS like we were talking about. Another experiment called Drain Brain 2.0. This one's looking at blood flow between the heart and the brain, uses a special neck collar to understand what's going on with those dynamics with blood flow between the heart and the brain in microgravity. There are more combustion experiments. We saw that in the video, something that we do on almost every ISS mission these days because, of course, even flames burn differently in space. We don't have convection, air is moving differently, and that has led us to a lot of breakthroughs in understanding more about how fire burns, what makes up these different constituents of flames. This mission, they'll be doing experiments called SOFI, and that will be looking at the different models for flammability with applications toward future space missions and also some terrestrial applications for combustion models. So as you can see, you heard the astronauts talk about it in the video. We do all kinds of science from all different aspects. When you remove this elephant in the room that is gravity, this variable that's present in all experimental models forever from the beginning of time on Earth. If you remove that, who knows what results can happen. So it's a really, really exciting place to do science.
I'm most fascinated by the human aspect, especially what you talked about with how fluid flows inside of the body. Did you notice anything with your vision when you came back?
Well, good question. Yeah, I actually did have a pretty extreme case of SANS, and so it was something that when I was on orbit, I did a lot of extra exams and images. So we actually have an OCT machine on board the International Space Station. So this is a machine that we can use to look at the back of our eye, to look at the retina, the choroid, and understand really the anatomy of the eyeball and the surrounding structures. So I actually did have a pretty extreme shift. My only real symptom, and the only thing that has lasted until now, is that I have perfect vision. I actually wore contacts or glasses before I went to space, and for me, so one of the hallmarks of SANS is that you can have a flattening of the back of the eyeball, so this changes the refraction, and for me, my prescription was just this magic amount that was completely counteracted by this change that I had into my eyeball. So now I have 20/15 vision.
How about that?
And that's persisted for 5 years.
Vision.
Yeah, I usually refer to it as the most expensive corrective surgery. Thank you to the taxpayers. But that is all of the other anatomical changes to my eye have returned to normal, so nobody's really concerned about the health of my eyeball, but I still have this perfect vision.
How about that? Wow. So if I go up into space, I can potentially lose my glasses?
Well, for most people it actually makes their vision a little bit worse, but it depends on where you start. So we'll have to look into your prescription. If it's nearly the same as mine, then you might have the same result.
Then I need to go to space to get it fixed. Forget LASIK. That's really interesting, Jessica. Thank you for sharing that with us. We are currently T-minus 1 hour and 55 minutes and counting from liftoff of the Falcon 9 from Launchpad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. Crew-10 currently inside Dragon Endurance. So far, they've completed their comm checks to make sure they can communicate with the teams here on the ground. Their seats have rotated upright to their reclined launch position. That allows them to see and access their display panels, as you can see there on the right-hand side of your screen. They've also completed their suit leak checks to make sure that their spacesuits are working properly. And now you see the closeout team making sure that side hatch has a good seal. If you've been watching us since we came on air, I'm NASA's Daryl Nail with NASA, and I mentioned that twice. NASA astronaut Jessica Meir is here as well, providing outstanding audio commentary. We're going to expand our live coverage in a little more than an hour from now, or actually a little less than an hour from now. We'll come on and bring our SpaceX commentators online, as long as our NASA commentator in Hawthorne, California. Here's another look at the crew going into space today. The Crew-10 commander is NASA astronaut Anne McClain. She's a West Point graduate and U.S. Army colonel who has spent 204 days in space and completed 2 spacewalks. She's a highly decorated Master Army aviator with over 2,000 flight hours, and she even played for the USA Rugby Women's National Team.
Yeah, that's right. My classmate Anne. She's a natural leader, and she is exactly where she should be, leading this crew to space today.
Your Crew-10 pilot is NASA astronaut Nichole Ayers, a U.S. Air Force major and graduate of the Air Force Academy. Nichole has flown the T-38 and the F-22 Raptor, logging over 1,400 flight hours, including 200 in combat. This will be her first spaceflight, making history as the first astronaut from NASA's 2021 class to fly.
You know, to add another dimension, Nichole also minored in Russian while she was at the Air Force Academy. So lots of, we talked about shared language earlier, and in a literal sense as well here for these crew.
Very helpful in this mission and this flight, and better communicating with her mission specialist, cosmonaut Kirill Peskov.